Hello everyone, thanks for joining me back on StubbleMeetsSteel. I was excited to find out that Goodfellas had decided to revamp the Styletto. And if you've seen my videos of the Styletto, you know that I like that razor. And one of the small critiques that I had of it was I wanted a little bit more blade clamping, and like I say about most razors is I wanted just a tiny bit more efficiency without losing some of that smoothness. And so they redesigned it. They now have a V2 or version 2 of the Goodfellas Styletto. At a quick glance, they look very similar. You know, obviously same handle design. They come with the same different blue and red are the most common base plates. I guess in maybe some other country codes you can get gold and green, but I've never seen those. I don't know if they're going to do those in the Styletto V2 or not. But one of the things that I definitely noticed right away on the specs was on the original version 1, the blade gap was 0.55 millimeter blade gap. They just say that it's slightly positive exposure, but don't give you the exact specification. On the new one, they changed things quite a bit. If I recall correctly, the blade gap jumped from a 0.55 to a 0.88. And then again, they don't tell you what the positive exposure is on the version 1, but on the version 2, it's 0.37 millimeter positive exposure. So without knowing exactly how positive the original one was, I kind of agree with my buddy Sig Solo that it seemed like this might be a little bit spicy. So I was curious, yes, they gave it more blade clamping, but did they make it a little bit too aggressive and take away some of the smoothness and mildness that I really enjoyed about the version 1, or did they kind of improve things? So let's get into it and see how it does. For blades today, I have the 7 o'clock green, the super stainless, the Russian ones is what I like. For today's soap, I'm trying something new. Let's see here. You can hardly see it, but I have these little samples of Zingari, man. You can't really see that very well. And this one is the Distiller. And I didn't bring up the scent notes. I'll put those up for you. But for me, off the sample here, it has a really good like bourbon and like a charred wood type of scent to it. I've got my homemade brush here with the Sinbad knot. Let's get going here. Wow, this is a really good charred oak barrel type smell to it. This soap, really good bourbon smell. Soap's popping nicely here. All right. Hold on 1 minute, I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about the distraction. So I'm all lathered up. What I wanted to point out, some people are unaware of what blade clamping is. And if you look closely, you see this little area right here, basically where the top cap and the bottom cap are meeting. There's a very small area of real estate right here. And basically the more area there is there, the more blade clamping and less chatter you're gonna have, because the blade is more securely basically clamped, hence the name blade clamping in the razor, and it prevents the blade from kind of wavering and kind of making that chattering noise. So on the, you can see close up, there's quite a big difference in the blade gap there versus the V1 in the red versus the V2. You can see there's much larger gap. The profile of the base plate, they've also made thinner on the V2, the new one, versus the original. They've said they've also changed the head geometry a little bit. So let's see how it shaves. I'm gonna do the version 1 on the right side of my face here. Very nice. But I do notice the slightest hint of the chatter on the version 1 right away, just because my facial hair is kind of coarse and dense. If you have a lighter beard, you may never even notice it. And don't get me wrong, it's not bad. It's just something I start to notice that it's starting to maybe almost chatter. Mostly in the thicker areas of my facial hair, around my chin. So there's a tiny bit of blade feel on the V1, but very smooth and manageable. Let's see how the new version 2 is. Just off that few passes there, it definitely has more blade clamping. I'm not getting the sensations of the chatter as I was with the version 1. They definitely increased the blade clamping as they mentioned. And you can see it. I'll post a picture up side by side of the V1 and V2. If you look at them, you can visually see the difference in the blade clamping as well. Well, that was interesting. They both, you can tell that they're cousins or they're brothers. They definitely feel very, not very similar, but they definitely are have shaping characteristics that are definitely similar between the two. There was a tiny bit more blade feel with the newer one, but not a ton on that pass anyways. And I definitely enjoyed the extra blade clamping. So far, so good. Okay, let's try not to mess this up. Put this on that side. Go back to the stiletto on this side. This is against the grain here for me on my neck. I'd say if you're a Scotch or a whiskey drinker and you like that kind of smoked wood smell, that peatiness that some Scotches and stuff can have, you'd really like the smell of the soap. Again, just a tiny bit more blade feel, but not a ton. It's hard to balance, it's hard to dance that line. We always say we want a little bit more efficiency. Well, the only way they can do that is basically by changing something. And unfortunately, when you do that, whether it's geometry, exposure, gap, you're going to change how the razor feels. So the question is, as always, how much can you tweak those measurements to kind of still find that sweet spot? You don't want to take away all that smoothness and pleasure that the razor had. You don't want to turn it into a totally different animal. Maybe a tiny bit more water in there. All right, these passes I find is where I can really kind of see how a razor works for me or not on the across the grain and against the grain. So let's see how it does. Do across the V1. All right, let's see the V2. Definitely notice the more blade feel on the across the grain pass there. For the version 2 has more blade feel. Not a ton, but it's definitely there, and I definitely notice it. Can't exactly wipe your face with soap-laden hands, can you? All right, let's go for the last pass here. Soap bubble there. All right, let's go for the version 2. Let me get cleaned up under my nose here. So for all intents and purposes, feels pretty much the same on both sides here. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of a cleanup here. Okay, everybody, so final thoughts. What do I think of the new V2 versus the V1? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, one of my critiques of this razor from when I first got the V1 was, yes, I definitely felt like, you know, I don't want to make it seem like it's chatter city. Again, it's because I have a coarse, thick, dense beard. If you've never noticed the chattering with the V1, then hey, rock it, don't listen to me. It's just for me, that's what I tend to pick up on, just the hints of chatter. I've used worse razors for sure that chatter all over the place. This is not that, so don't get me wrong. But there's definitely some chatter with the V1. Okay, so they did improve the clamping for sure on the V2. There's no doubt about it. I get more plow through where it just slices through the hair without that chattering sensation. But like I mentioned, you know, it's hard to dance that line of that Goldilocks razor. If you're going to push up the efficiency with the blade gap and the exposure, then yes, I definitely get more blade feel. And, you know, for me, this razor is kind of in a league all of its own. As far as for an aluminum razor, this new V2 is definitely a step above the version 1. I would say the Bison, the Lupo aluminum, or the Apex aluminum, or the aluminum Overlander. I would say all of those are closer to the V1. This particular razor is definitely a step above those. I would say it's definitely more on par for me of like a Rockwell 4.5 or like a 4.5 would be a perfect analogy. That's kind of where I would put this. I would say this to me is even a little bit spicier than the Goodfellas and Tessie that I did, the stainless steel one. That one I find a little more comfortable and a little bit easier to use. This is kind of pushing that comfort envelope for me. I can use it daily. I've used it the last few days, and you know, yeah, it's a great daily. And if you like that tiny bit, a little bit more blade, if you ever use the Colonial CR7, I would say that this kind of reminds me of the 3-plate on the CR7. That'd probably be my best aluminum analogy I could give you. So, you know, which one do I prefer? You know, I like the extra blade clamping. I kind of wish that that was all that they really changed, to be quite honest with you. I was a little apprehensive when I saw that they opened up the gap, and more importantly, you know, the exposure measurement was there, but as I mentioned a few times, they didn't really give that. They just say, quote unquote, slightly positive for the version 1. So you have no idea what the true measurement there is on the blade exposure. But anyways, I like the smoothness and the ease of use a little bit better of the V1. You know, it's plenty, I don't want to say aggressive, but it's that perfect spot for me. This one kind of pushes it a tiny bit. I have to not necessarily psych myself up to use it, but it's one of those razors where if I'm looking for a smooth, painless, easy BBS style shave, or I use something aggressive the day before, I'd probably grab for the V1. If I wanted something a little bit step up, then this is where this would come in. So it just depends on what you personally like. You know, I really like the extra blade clamping for sure that they did on this, because like I said, it definitely gives me more of the plow through, and I don't get that slight sensation of the starts of the chatter that I do with the V1. So overall, you know, I'm kind of torn. If I had to pick, I guess I have to kind of go back to I like the V1 a little bit better, to be quite honest with you. This one, for the against the grain and the across the grain, was kind of right there on that comfort limit for me. If you ever use the Alpha, the Lone Star, or the Cape Cod with the .90 plate, this was kind of in that area, you know, to me, but maybe, you know, a little bit trickier to use. It's kind of in that particular realm of not quite mild, but, you know, somewhere in the medium or light medium category, something like that. Well, there's you go. There's my take on the new Styletto V2. I hope you enjoyed it. I like that they kept the handle. I wish I maybe kind of made it a little bit mild, but that's just my take. I kind of prefer a Rockwell 3/4 plate, so that's kind of my wheelhouse, and I shave every day, so that's what I personally look for. But if you use the V1 and you thought that it was a little bit mild for you, you'd probably like the V2, or vice versa. If you like really, really mild razors, then I would definitely say see if you could pick up the V1. Well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed the show. Take care.